Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network analyst, Chargers radio analyst, and Move the Sticks podcast co-host. He's got a tough job because he's in Kansas City. He's got his final mock draft, and he has no idea what's going to go on, and neither do we. And there haven't been too many drafts where we've gone in, Daniel, saying, I don't know what's going to happen. I assume we know what's happening at the top, right? Bryce Young's going to Carolina.
I feel like we know that. That might be the only thing that we know, Dan, at this point in time. But I mean, as an analyst for this thing, you root for two things. You root for quarterbacks and chaos. And I think we're going to be 2 for 2 in this one.
Okay, but there's no official report that Bryce Young is going to Carolina.
No.
Can you remember the last time where we didn't know the number 1 overall pick?
I go back to the Kyler Murray year. We were pretty certain, but it wasn't nailed down. And then when we were on set as the red carpet show was taking place. So you're just kind of getting mic'd up. You're just kind of milling around. And I look over at the monitor and I see Kyler Murray in a red and pink pinstripe suit. And I said, oh, yeah, he's going. He's going. That's an Arizona Cardinals number 1 overall pick suit that he's wearing.
I still feel and felt that the draft starts at number 2.
Yeah, that's where it is. I mean, if we assume, and I think it will happen, Bryce Young goes number 1. Now, if we're 95% sure of the number 1 pick, we are 5% sure of the number 2 pick. No clue. I mean, and normally, Dan, it's like, okay, man, I think that like the Trey Lance, we had this conversation that year, day of the draft. And I said, look, there's enough coming late here that I believe Trey Lance is going to be the pick over Mac Jones for San Francisco. Like, that was kind of the last little riddle. And you felt maybe 80% confident. Like, nothing's got out of Houston. I mean, there's all this noise and all this uproar about, will they or won't they with CJ Stroud, but no concrete information.
What do you think they should do?
I think they should take CJ Stroud. So to me, I think there's no way you can come out of these first 2 picks without your quarterback. I don't think there are future quarterbacks on their roster. And I don't buy into the theory of, well, you know what, next year there's great quarterbacks. Well, yeah, there's no guarantee you're going to be picking up here next year. You've got a chance to draft a guy who's better than anybody that you have, which I think CJ Stroud is.
Yeah.
So go ahead and take him. Now, Dan, there's only every couple of years where you're going to have a guy like Trevor Lawrence where you're going to sleep great at night knowing, okay, I feel this is a high likelihood this guy's going to be a stud. Those guys don't come around very often. You gotta take a little bit of a leap here, but you got to go for it.
So you got drama at 2, and then you throw in Arizona. Do they go with Paris Johnson? Do they get their left tackle, or do they trade out of that because somebody wants to trade up to get a quarterback? What do you think happens?
Well, there's so many holes there, and they've made it known. They're screaming from the mountaintops they would love to get out of there. So the challenge is I did it to have some fun in a mock draft. And I thought, okay, if Houston's really down to Will Anderson and CJ Stroud, I can fudge it and then just make a trade and give them both. So I took that out of the mix. Arizona gets the trade down they covet. They go down to 12 and they could still get, one of the top offensive linemen. But having said that, when you dig into it and look at draft day trades over the last few years, 5 or 6 years, Dan, there hasn't been a draft day trade to move up into like the top 5. The last one was Trubisky, and that was 1 spot. Like, we haven't seen a team go from 10, 11, 12 and come all the way up to 3. You got to go back to, I think it's 2014 when that happened. So the trades have been happening at 10. You saw Fields move up to take Fields at 10. We've seen other movement in that range. But as of late, when you're going to make a jump into the top 3, usually that takes place ahead of time.
Quarterback who could be a bust.
Well, I think you can flip a coin on Richardson and Levis. I feel like there's dividing lines here. Bryce Young, to me, is the best one. There's a little bit of a gap. Then you get to Stroud. But I think both those guys are rock solid. Then I think you start, it's a little bit of a wild card now. I have Richardson next for me because the upside is ridiculous. But the sample size scares the heck out of me. It's a trail of tears when you look at the guys with that limited of a sample size. And then when you look at Will Levis, it's just, it's a roller coaster ride when you pop on the tape. And, I get a little bit nervous when, through the process, you go, yeah, but the injuries, but then the offensive line, the play, there's a lot of buts.
Yeah.
That makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, I got to see consistency. If you can't be consistent in college, you're not going to be consistent, and your accuracy doesn't change. It's usually who you are. And now we're saying, oh, somebody's going to change Will Levis. They'll make him more accurate. It's rare, I think, when that happens. Maybe technique, maybe, throwing motion, your footwork, but it feels like what you are in college, accuracy-wise, is what you'll be in the pros, if not worse.
Yeah, and people point to Josh Allen here because he made such a leap with accuracy.
Yeah.
But I go back, first of all, he's at Wyoming. This is apples and oranges comparing who he's with, who he's playing with there. The other thing is with Josh, I could pull out throws of him, throwing with touch, like layered balls. He wasn't consistent, but I've seen him do it. It'd be like watching a golfer, and I've seen you can hit these shots. You're just not doing it consistently. With Levis, it's just everything is firm. There's not a lot of touch to his football. So that, to me, is more difficult to change.
We're talking to Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network analyst. He'll be on the call, NFL Network, providing live coverage of the draft starting tonight at 8 Eastern. Now that you have Aaron Rodgers, what did the Jets do with their 15th overall pick?
I mean, the defense is in pretty good shape, and having Rodgers there, it just feels like this will be a Rodgers influence selection. So I just keep going back to that offensive line. And if Skoronski gets there from Northwestern, he's similar to Vera Tucker in that Vera Tucker is a guard but can play tackle. He played some tackle at USC. Skoronski's a tackle who some think could play guard. Dan, I saw it last year with the Chargers with a guy like Jamari Sawyer, who was, a 6th-round pick, but he had some flexibility and versatility over a 17-game season. Having offensive linemen that can go inside and outside and always allow you to get your 5 best guys on the field is huge. So as much as I love the talent of Mekhi Becton, he hasn't been reliable and healthy. Yeah. I think to me that's a good way for them to go.
Where should Bijan Robinson go?
Well, he's my 3rd overall player in a draft with so many exceptions and little guys and inexperienced players. Like, I feel like he comes in clear packaging. You know exactly what you're getting with him. I think he's going to be a great player. He's going to be a top 5 running back in the league. I always say with running backs, I think it makes more sense if you're a finished product to kind of put that finishing piece in there. And I look at the Philadelphia Eagles and I say, okay, well, what are the premier positions? They've got the quarterback.
Yeah, but you work for the Eagles, though, Daniel, and
I know I'm getting there, Dan.
They're not gonna take.
I know, but
right?
I want it so bad. I want it so bad. And then so I've been telling people, they say, where should he go? I said, well, he should go to Philadelphia. And I list out all this litany of reasons. And I go, but I worked with Howie for 2 years and he's not going to do it. So I'm selfishly hoping, Dan, just for you, because you know this, that I'm hoping that they do shock the world and take him, just so that my one person watching here and Dan Patrick can see my live reaction on the air and just see me turn flush white that he actually did it.
I love Bijan Robinson, and I think that personality is wonderful. The position obviously is flawed financially.
Yeah.
But if I know I can get a difference maker, like what would stop the Jets from taking Bijan Robinson? He helps you immediately.
Yeah, I think with Breece Hall, what we saw from him last year, I think he can do a lot of those things. I think they're actually pretty similar players. But I would put it this way. This would be my sales pitch in the draft room. So let's go back to 2012. I'll jump into the Philly draft room, and I would make this case. Let's rebrand it. Let's not talk about running backs. Let's look at this as an OW. We're going to call him an offensive weapon. And if you look at the team that is our nemesis or our competition in conference, it is us and the 49ers. They have McCaffrey. They have Debo. We could have our own version of that here with Bijan Robinson. And if Debo Samuel is a major in wide receiver who minors in running back, we're going to have a Bijan Robinson who majors in running back and minors as a wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree. I when we had him on, I said I see as a Debo Samuel kind of weapon here.
Yes.
And that's the way I would use him. He's got wonderful hands, and it just feels like he's got star power.
So I think we could get together on this thing, and we're kind of forming a running back union. We're rebranding. We're calling them offensive weapons. Not everybody's going to fall into that. You're going to still have your 3 yard and a cloud of dust type backs. But for guys like Bijan Robinson, let's put him in a different category.
If Hendon Hooker was 22, Finish that sentence.
I think he'd be a lock as a first round pick. I don't think even, I think he's got a good opportunity to go in the first round as, somebody who's older. But to me, it's not as big of an issue as it used to be, because if you look at the quarterbacks that have flopped recently, as I mentioned with the number of starts, like it's the inexperienced younger guys who are getting thrown out into the field and aren't ready for it. And if you look at the value picks in the draft, look at the starting quarterbacks that were taken outside the first round. When you look at, the Kirk Cousins, the Dak Prescotts, we saw it last year with Brock Purdy. Those guys played a ton of ball, a little bit older, arrived a little bit more mature, a little bit more experienced. So I don't think that's frowned upon quite as much as it would have been a few years back.
Wildest rumor you've heard?
Oh, gosh. Last night I heard a rumor that the Titans were going to trade up to 8 to secure Anthony Richardson to try and keep anybody else from moving up to get him. And then Ryan Tannehill was going to get traded to the Arizona Cardinals. So that was a rumor that was floating around last night. I don't know what you do with it.
Whoa. But, yeah, sometimes you don't want to hear those. When I covered the NBA draft, and you would hear these rumors, and then I didn't want to cloud my head with the possibility of something like that. Because just like you said, I don't know what I do with this.
I don't know. Yeah.
But if you,
that's the beauty of being in this spot, right? Like Ian Rappaport, he's got to vet that type of stuff. I'm like, wow, I've heard a million stories. That's just the latest one that I've heard.
It's been quiet on the Lamar Jackson front. Feels like that's a good thing.
I think that the waters have calmed there. That's kind of the vibe that I get. I think the Odell Beckham move was a little bit of an olive branch to him, saying, okay, hey, we've got a new offensive coordinator. It's going to play a little bit more to you as a passer than maybe the previous offense. That's one olive branch. Now we bring in Odell Beckham. Okay, we can't say we're not investing in weapons and receivers. So I don't know if they're able to come together on a long-term deal, but it doesn't feel like there's this collision course that maybe we were headed on a month ago.
And then DeAndre Hopkins, I don't know if he's going to Buffalo, if he's going to go to Baltimore. Any thoughts on, Arizona's ready to unload him, but who's going to take that contract?
Yeah, there's two sides of that. I think you hit it. I think Arizona would be happy to move on and continue to kind of take this thing down to the studs. But I don't know who's going to be in on that. Buffalo's the team that you hear rumored. I know there's some talk with Buffalo with wide receivers in this draft, and maybe Diggs can spend some more time in the slot. So, looking at some outside receivers in the draft, and if you're going to let Diggs play a little bit in the slot, then having Hopkins on the outside would be a pretty fun combination, provided he's healthy and the player that we remember him being.
Let me go back to the Titans. You mentioned that the wild rumor, maybe they go up and get Anthony Richardson. Have they moved on from Malik Willis?
I don't get that. I don't get that sense that they've completely moved on, but I don't think I don't think the faith and trust has been put in him that, okay, we have our future quarterback going forward. I think there's a balance saying we haven't given up on someone.
But he's a project.
Also, we're looking,
Daniel,
very much so.
You can't go, we saw enough after 1 year. We're moving on from him.
Yeah, I would say they're dating. I would not say they would refer to themselves as in a committed relationship.
Have fun tonight.
I appreciate you, buddy. I've got to make sure you got a new phone number, Dan, because I always appreciate your text during this thing.
You know what, Fritzy, if you have a new phone number contact for Daniel. Now, during the commercial breaks, I'll text you.
Yeah.
Not when you're on the air, because that's unprofessional.
No. Well, I would never check during while we're on the air. Come on, Dan. You've taught me better than that.
You've been on the set where guys are checking their phones.
I've been on the set when guys are checking their phones as the camera takes a single.
Have fun tonight. I'll try to only annoy you during the commercial breaks.
You're the best, buddy. Thanks, man.
That's Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network analyst and providing live coverage. Draft tonight, Kansas City, starting at 8 Eastern.